Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the NCG studios in Texas. Glad you could be with us today. We're looking forward to another good time. And without any hesitation, I would like to introduce, I'm going to say our guest. He's becoming a regular, and that's fine by me. That would be Dr. Michael W. Jones. And I want to start off by asking him a question. Did you say we're going to start calling this show Mr. Fulows Neighborhood? Am I right? Are you there, Dr. Jones? I'm supposed to have a guest today.
Yes,
And
we didn't know that. We're getting him framed up right now.
Okay, well, I'll save my question until he's framed up.
Never again assume that your guest is present. Always let us know when you have a guest. It'd be great. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Okay. Being as he's on that end,
All right. Now say you're sorry to the audience.
okay.
All right.
Hey, it wouldn't be as much fun if everything went off perfectly every time.
Light Dr. Jones up.
Yeah, turn it off.
Okay. All right. Why don't you give us a little bit of a monologue, Daryl? Make the audience laugh, cheer them up.
Well, I will do what I can to make them laugh.
That's right.
I don't know.
Make them cry, make them angry, whatever it takes to pass the time. Dr. Jones will be with you in just a
I'll
moment.
take a nap, and they can join me. How's that?
Make them nap. Okay, you can do that. You can do that.
Actually, I'll talk about a good story I heard this morning because I really want to hear more about it. It was a new twist to an old story, and okay. Bye-bye. Yes.
Okay, are
I
we on,
guess you weren't talking to me just then, were you?
are we on the show?
I think so.
Okay.
Are we not?
I guess.
I can't tell from this end. I'm just looking at a camera and an audience.
I understand. I didn't know that I was on there, but we had someone who just called in and who is going to supply food. That would be Tammy. And she's going to do that for next week. And so I was just saying thank you, but we'll talk later. I'm doing a show with you. I failed to tell everyone here that we were scheduled to do a show together, and maybe I should have said something, but I got caught up with phone calls and messages. There was a show on this afternoon that I think was very, very powerful. It's a new show called Meeting of the Minds with Christopher Mauti. He's an awesome individual. He's an atheist, and he has become one of our newer hosts. And I think he's doing a marvelous, wonderful job. And so I guess my point is, it is what it is. And so let's just work from there.
Okay. Well, yeah, I would have said something from this end, but I just made the mistake of assuming that everyone was on the same page on that end. And so I will try to remember to say something in the way of a reminder next time just to make sure. But anyway, it's good to be in conversation with you again. I always enjoy that. And I started off by asking a question, but I don't think you were available to hear it. Aren't we calling this show Mr. Fulows Neighborhood or something like that these days? What did we decide on there?
Fly in the studio, by the way. I think that Joey must have brought the fly, or crew member. Oh, it was Sean that brought the fly. So he's an atheist fly. And so he was telling me to take my glasses off. But my point was, we want to do something for children. I think sometimes we get caught up, especially theists. We get caught up with doing things for ourselves and not thinking about the kids. And a Mr. Rogers show would be wonderful early Sunday morning. And we were brainstorming about how to do that. And I was telling my wife, I said, you know, your show is more about Daryl's place, maybe Daryl and Tina's place, than it is about what would love do. Because in a sense, when we talk about what would love do, it's almost, I don't know, it's a powerful statement or even a question, rather. But sometimes I think that it's rather a subject that's just focused on one thing in a particular way. And I think that it would be more interesting to talk about what would Daryl do, or let's talk about Daryl's place, because you have some fascinating things that you've gone through in life. You have so many people who are friends of yours, people moving forward with us and everyone else. And so I don't know, we were just brainstorming that, a better title that represents who you are.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Of course, when we talk about, what would love do, and I made this statement before, it might be misleading at times because I honestly can't say that that's always at the forefront of my mind and every decision I make, every thing that I do. And so, for anyone to think that I represent what love would do, I wouldn't want to take that upon myself. But what would Daryl do? Hopefully sometimes is consistent with what love would do, and sometimes maybe I'll make a mistake or do something to the contrary. But it'll always be me. And so
Right.
what you see is what you get, so to
Right.
speak. So that works for
Sometimes
me.
what happens is we ask questions like, what would Jesus do? And when we do answer the question, we make a doctrine out of it. I think this is exactly what the disciples did. Jesus was teaching people how to love, and they made love into a doctrine, messed up the entire thing. And so I'm not convinced that we should stay where we make mistakes. And sometimes we make mistakes by, forming doctrines. And I'm talking about doctrines that make absolutely no sense. Now, it's true that one could say, for the sake of argument, that a doctrine isn't really any different than a theory, except for a theory deals with facts, whereas the majority of what doctrines are deal more with ideas. However, there are in different disciplines, aspects of doctrine that really do deal with facts. But I don't know. I think it's interesting that we could even toy with the idea. But what would love do? When you answer it, it's almost like someone's going to make a doctrine out of it, and so why go there? And so sometimes we make mistakes by calling our shows weird names.
Well, I think it's okay to call it certain names if we come across something better or decide that it wasn't the best name. We've toyed with the idea, we've experimented, and maybe come up with something better. Of course, to me, that's the whole idea anyway, is just always looking for something that works better. And I hope we can continue down that path, and I think that is where we're going.
Yeah, sometimes I think that we can take these shows and develop ideas, and after we develop the idea, then we can give that idea to someone else to develop it, and then we can give it to another to develop it a different way.
Yep.
Yeah. What did you want to talk about this evening?
Well, I would like to proceed a little further with something I heard this morning. I heard you talking about a story that I've heard all my life, and or I should say most of my life. And I always thought of it one way until this morning. And, I love mind change. I love challenges. I love growing and getting new concepts of things, especially things that I'm very familiar with and heard for many years. But you were dealing with the story of Lazarus and the rich man this morning, and I was wondering if we could talk about that some more.
I would love to talk about it.
Great, great, because I thought of a couple of things after I listened, and I'd never really thought of Abraham being not representing. I mean, I'm like your average church person in that respect, and always heard it that he represented the good side of things. He was the one that was in heaven. And I'm just going to give you my former version, my idea of the story. Abraham was in heaven, therefore this poor man was comforted because he had had such a tough life, and therefore he should be in heaven. For some reason or another, it doesn't say that he was a good man or that he ever did anything worthwhile or believed anything. I mean, there's a number of things that you could throw in there and say, what was it that qualified him to be in heaven, and really what qualified Abraham to represent heaven in the first place? So it really, like I said, it just caused me to do some serious reconsidering of the whole story. But well, that was just some of the thoughts that I had, and to look at it as a two-sided coin, and neither side being what represented the best scenario. Like I said, it just kind of changed things drastically. So
I could say, and I'm brainstorming here as we, contemplate what I taught on this morning. One of the things that I see in that particular passage is the possibility of actually retaining hell in it. I understand that the text really isn't about hell. But one of the things that I would do, I would simply say, a lot of the things that we talk about when it comes to the Bible are really not even a part of the Bible. Let me give you what I'm suggesting. There are some things in the Greek manuscripts that suggest all kinds of ideas that you can't transport into English. And so what we do as translators, we try to find a meaningful equivalent. I was talking with someone this morning, and I said, you could take 15 words in Greek and retell what those 15 words are in Greek that is in context by utilizing 50 to 75 words in English. And the person hesitated for a moment and said 50 to 75 words. I said, you could even make it 90. But the thing that you could not do and be legitimate would be to add or subtract from its meaning. In other words, translating should be just retelling the same thing in a different language. And simply because we don't have the same constructs, we do not have the same idioms, we don't have the same punchlines, it may be necessary sometimes to change it all up in order to make the same point. And sometimes the same points are not even possible to make.
that would explain why I believe it is the form critical, if I'm stating that correctly, that wouldn't be a good method to use at all.
Form critical reminds me of, the days in which they would take, for instance, they would look far and wide for some noun that would fit for a Greek noun, some participle that would fit for a Greek participle. And one of the things that happened years ago was that people finally started understanding the Greek noun, adjective, verb, and verbals, and the rest of the parts of speech, and they started realizing that these are not really identical. And the syntax is not identical, the parts of speech are not identical, the case system isn't identical, the tense system isn't identical. In fact, the people who wrote these Greek documents, their primary language was a tenseless language. And so the way that they utilized verbs was more along the lines of aspect rather than tense. And so when an English-only reader reads a document, we focus in on tense. We focus in on, our syntax. We focus in on certain things, and we want to get them because that's how we arrive at our conclusions. But the Greeks don't arrive at their conclusions one and the same way. And so when you retell what Jesus supposedly said in Aramaic, in Greek, it's going to be quite different. And so I'm not convinced that the story is even similar in a sense, but it may be. We have no way of knowing. But when you deal with what is, that is this story about Lazarus and the rich man, we have a contrast. The contrast is you have a rich man who is, he's dressed wonderfully so. He's feeding, he has everything that he wants, and yet at the same time he ignores, the person who is hurting, starving, suffering. And then they both die. And now the roles are reversed, and Abraham's going to indicate, the rich man who's screaming out in agony, just like Lazarus used to scream out in agony and pain and hunger. He's going to say, there's nothing that we can do about it. There's too much distance between, us to do anything about it. We can't go to you, and you can't come to us. And so you are in a hopeless state. That's exactly how Lazarus felt. He felt hopeless. And people get that way in life. And I'm simply saying that Jesus was painting the most wonderful picture of how to reject a mindset of God that leaves human beings hopeless. And this would be in both categories. In other words, I really think that Jesus was rejecting, the notion of what the rich man was doing to Lazarus and what Father Abraham was doing to the rich man in the entire story. And so it's rather a story about rejecting both sides of a theology that says an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Yeah, exactly.
I suffered, so now you're suffering. It's that kind of exchange. And so I think it's a wonderful, wonderful story. And, you have to look at it, that is, in its contrast. Contrast it with Matthew chapter 25. It's all about, some going to this eternal punishment versus eternal life. I'm not convinced that we should use the term eternal punishment or eternal life. But I don't think that anything hinges on whether it's called eternal or not. I think the thing that hinges the entire context of Matthew 25 is that in that context, Jesus is indicating to the people that people should feed, and hear this, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit those people who are in bondage or prison. And those people who he's talking to, their God left people in prison. Their God left people naked. Their God left people hungry. Their God left people dead. That is, in the case of the doctrines of infanticide, genocide, and slavery. So my point is, I think that Jesus was rebuking God in many, many passages. And so if there ever was one who rejected and rebuked God, it would be Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Something else I was thinking about uh, concerning Abraham, um, you know, if you think about it, I mean, what it appears to me is that Abraham basically was at a complete loss. I mean, uh, I don't see him as someone that necessarily needs to be faulted in the scenario, because he didn't have anything to offer. He didn't have a solution. It was as if he was saying, and like I said, this is something I've never really thought about before or seen, but looking at it this way, I can see that, and what he represented more than just himself personally, but there was no, there was nothing more than that to offer. It's say, as if to say, I can't help you. I don't have anything for you. And so you're right, on both sides of the coin, it's a hopeless situation. And to me, this makes that story so much larger. I mean, it envelops whole ideologies rather than just a couple of individuals who either supposedly didn't do something bad or did do something bad, which is about the only other way I think you can look at this story. But to me, it's pretty obvious that that's the category that Jesus dealt with. I mean, he didn't keep things on a small scale as if, well, this just applies to a couple of people here. And like you said, it applied to God. He was challenging this God that they believed in. And reminds me of something that I said to Greg the other night, Greg Bray, after the Ustream. We hung around on the Hangout for a little while, and I think where is he? He's out of town somewhere, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Mm, sure. Mm, mhm, mhm, mhm,
I don't think that's really helping them out at all. What are your thoughts?
Don't you, well, yeah, don't you think that people have been conditioned to that from behind the pulpits? I mean, that's what they hear, that's what is ingrained in them if they buy into the normal idea of church. They, it creates high maintenance people because they don't, you're right in what you're saying, the responsibility is put off on somebody else. It's as if, I'm not responsible for myself, therefore, I'm just going to need a lot of maintenance.
Yeah, I agree.
It takes a long time, I think, and of course, figuring out how to deal with it, I guess, would be the first thing. But I know that by what you're saying, we've had people that have just kind of wandered off, and it seems like they always come back, or many of them have come back and realized, I'm responsible here, and I've failed. I walked away because we've talked about this before as far as coming together. When we say that we're against church, we're talking about what it's made up of. We're not talking about coming together and maturing together and being taught and fitting in and taking responsibility. But we're against what is happening in your average church scenario, and this is one of the things I think they're creating high maintenance people.
I agree. I think that now that we have left church, I think that the same ones who left church with us, I think that the majority of them are afraid to take responsibility. And I think they got used to someone else bearing all the responsibility. And I can't say that I didn't create part of that problem. I would have to say that by taking the responsibility and not allowing them to own up to their own problems, I think in a sense I have done them harm in a sense. But, trying to move people out of Christianity and church, that's a difficult project. And so if you don't do the high maintenance, they're not going to stay with you and go through the journey. And so it's a double-edged sword in a way. You're going to be looked at in a negative fashion. I don't care what you do. And so you are in a catch-22 in a sense. But I think that it's easy these days simply to assess things quickly. We can see that people are extremely failed. That is, in their positions of thinking and doing, their practices, their methods, simply because they are not willing to take responsibility for anything. It reminds me of something that I talk about all the time. People don't want to take responsibility for the streets. They don't want to take responsibility for the potholes. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want a system by which says you need to pay X, Y, and Z. They don't want that. They will gripe about it and gripe about it. But at the end of the day, you have to have a handful of people who are responsible enough to say, no, we are going to employ some system that would collect monies from everyone, so it won't make it difficult on just one individual, but it will make it easy for everyone to have highways, universities, bridges, etc. And that's what responsible people do. They think not just for themselves, but they think for others, and that's why I'm so proud of the people here in the New Covenant group.
Well, what we're talking about also makes me think about a marriage relationship, and it's something that I've noticed over the past few years that there is such a thing, and I think it's more common than not, of high maintenance relationship in a marriage. And if you've got someone that requires so much attention, or you have to continually go after them and try not to say the wrong thing and try to do everything just right in order for them to continue in the relationship, then it's all work. I don't think it's anything like what it's meant to be. But if you have two people that know how to take responsibility and truly care for one another, the maintenance level goes way down to where it's no longer a thing of maintenance at all. It just becomes a relationship of, is everything good with you? Yeah, I'm good. Is everything good with you? And most of the time, you don't even have to ask. I know you were talking along these lines earlier today. I heard you make a statement about language that a lot of the time nothing has to be said because you already know everything's fine. Anything's a little bit off, you'll detect it because you have a relationship rather than just a lot of maintenance.
Right. Relationships require many things. And if you take, for instance, you and your wife, if she can't, or if you can't own up to what you do wrong, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
And if you guys are not willing to make commitments, that's another big problem. And so, the question would be, if we are going to come together and have meaningful community, should people be willing to make commitments? I would argue yes, because I've never seen a relationship work without commitments, and I've never seen a relationship work without transparency, and I've never seen a relationship work without accountability. And so the list is long, but we're talking about building meaningful community as opposed to institutional style living where you don't really have to take responsibility. You simply become a parrot, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's painful in a sense to talk with people and watch them play dodgeball in a sense. I don't want to take responsibility. Dr. Jones, please don't talk me into committing to this or that. And I'm saying, what? It doesn't make sense. I try to tell people, well, do it for your kids if you won't do it for yourself. But it's an indirect statement in a sense. Why are you not wanting to do this for yourself? Why not step up to the plate? I don't understand those things, but it's something that maybe you could shed some light on.
Well, I can't say I have a lot of understanding myself other than what I've already stated. It seems like the more responsible people are those that haven't been infected by religion because, it seems like most religion, I don't care if it's Christian religion or some other religion, it's, and I addressed this on the Wednesday Google Hangout, I think. Here's the example I gave. I'll go back to a marriage relationship. If let's say there was a set of rules or commands, and just for the fun of it, let's say there was 10 of them, and I was going to marry someone, and I said, these are the 10 rules or commands of this marriage relationship. If we can keep them, then we will be doing it right and it will work. I would say, and of course we know that as theists, we've heard about these 10 commands all our life. Excuse me. And when I think about those 10 commands and try to think of them in terms of a marriage relationship, I don't really see much application at all. But it seems like if it was legitimate, they would apply and that we could just do these things and we would have a wonderful marriage. But in reality, I can see nothing but disaster. Excuse me. But in opposition to that, the way you're going to have something that's actually going to be meaningful is if you've got two people who are willing to take the responsibility for their own actions, who care enough about the other person to actually consider them and be honest and open enough to relate to one another and grow together in this relationship. And ultimately, you've got something. And of course, let's just, for the sake of argument, say that the thing that is the bottom line is this thing that we call love. Now, you've got some wonderful guidelines there, and it is something that to build upon rather than try to do or try to a command that you're keeping because you feel obligated, if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
Probably not stating it the best way, but hopefully I'm getting the meaning across.
Let me see if I can go back into history a bit.
Okay.
When we were in church, just to make things clear, 500-600 years ago, I'm joking.
We're not
but-
that old.
When we were young, we were raised, both in a similar context, that is of religious mindset that they were similar. We were taught that the law was holy,
Yeah.
and we were taught that Jesus came 2,000 years ago to fulfill the law, this holy law.
Right.
And the law
I
was
remember.
there to expose how wicked we were.
Mm-hmm.
So we bought into, in a sense, a doctrine that said at one point in time we did need the law. But now we don't need the law because sweet Jesus came along and he did all of these marvelous, wonderful things. And now we don't need the law. We need grace. And so in the theological paradigm that we were in, we said yes to the law, but yes to grace. And there were preachers who kept going back to the law, and they were called legalists. Then there were ministers who gravitated more toward grace, and people would say, you're practicing greasy grace.
Mm-hmm. I remember all that.
You can remember all of that, okay? But I'm
Yeah.
suggesting, and Bob Graves wrote something that really meant a lot to me because it reminded me of something that, that happened to me so many years ago. I said, I don't need to just leave the law, but I need to leave all of the concepts of grace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's shocking to most people, but leaving the law is wonderful, but we don't need to just leave the law, but we need to leave the administration of grace. That's what it was called. This grace message, the finished work of Jesus. And so when you start saying, I left the law, everybody goes, wow, that's wonderful. Now you're into grace. No, I left grace too. Well, how about the finished work of Christ? Regardless of what I left that too. And so, you keep moving forward, and religious people, they want to land somewhere and say, this is it, and I don't want to think. In other words, I think some theists who start moving forward, what they do is they leave the law, they leave grace, and then they will get into a science textbook, and they will turn the science book into, in a sense, another holy book. And that's not really where we need to land. We don't need to make anything a sacred cow, not even the term love. And this is why I would rather focus on Daryl's place rather than on, the term love, because sometimes when people just talk about the same term over and over again, it's overused and it gets rattled. It's like the term God. It's been overused, and so it's for the most part it's useless in a sense. I'm not suggesting that the term love is useless. I'm simply saying that I would rather keep it in perspective. And if we do, I think that's going to make the journey much easier. So let's leave the law, let's leave grace, let's leave the finished work of Christ, and let's move forward. I don't know how to make it any clearer than that. and yet very few theists, and I keep picking on theists because I am one. Very
Me
few
too.
theists will make that journey of leaving all of that baggage.
Well, let's deal with this issue of love for a moment, because I know it's not an aspect or a character trait that we're going to leave. I don't even think we can get away from it. I certainly hope not. But I can see the point of what you're saying, especially if I were to decide, okay, we're going to be all about love. It's going to be all about love, and we're going to call ourselves "What Would Love Do?" and we're going to focus in on that, and we're going to look at this definition that we have, and it says, you know, love is kind, love is patient, keeps no record of wrongs. And I make my list, and I've got my pencil and my ready to make the checks and make sure that I'm doing all. And here we go again. You know, instead of 10 commands, I've got 10 or how many ever things that I've got to make sure I'm doing. I think, you know, if this is real, and I'm convinced it is, I don't need to talk about it all the time. I don't need to check back and every day and make sure that I've done all these things on this list. I think it doesn't hurt to take a look at myself and maybe have someone else even look at me and say, you know, do you see these things in me? Is this happening to me? You know, I can even tell the way I'm responding to something. You know, if, let's just say, you know, throw out, for the sake of argument, Jesus said, love your enemies. And if I've got someone who has, at least in the past, seemed like an enemy to me, and they come my way and I'm kind, and I really don't remember what the problem I had, or, you know, just I'm not sensing any animosity toward them, I can say, you know what? I think there's something going on here that's good, you know, that, and maybe I'm going the right direction. But, and I think, in a sense, is that what you're saying? I mean, there is a moving forward, and there's a gaining ground, and just a being, just being who we are, kind of like, you know, Daryl's place. You know?
Right. You know, I think that we have to figure out things as we go along. It's like being a parent. You know, there isn't a textbook for every parent. We have to observe, not just observe. We have to deal with our children in a very creative way. And each and every one of us are, you know, very unique individuals. And so we use what's called linguistic creativity to deal with our children. It's not just true that we deal with them with our phonemes, but we sometimes make gestures. We do all kinds of amazing things just to figure it all out. And sometimes I tell my kids, I've learned more from you than you've learned from me. And so it's more of a learning curve for the parent sometimes than it is for the kid, because I think their challenges will be, or will come when they become my age, possibly. I don't know. And so
You know, I like to hope they won't have quite as many challenges as we did, because they won't have to go through a lot of things that we have. But by the same token, I was sharing with the group here this morning that, you know, I'm very thankful for my journey. And I like that term. I know it's thrown around, that term is thrown around a lot these days, but I just think that's a good way to put it. You know, life for each of us is a journey, and it's a little different for each and every one of us, but a lot of the experience is the same. And so much of what I've gone through, I feel like, has given me an advantage. You know, like what you were talking about earlier, about all the different things that you and I have gone through that we have in common, the thing about legalism and grace and so forth. And I'm thankful that, you know, when I speak to someone or I come across that, I know the mindset. I know where someone is, and sometimes that helps me to know how to try to encourage, or how to try to, you know, help the person in a way that will be beneficial to them.
Right. We're out of time, but
Yeah,
I
I
would
see
like
that.
for you
I
to
just
do
noticed it.
both of us a favor. You can sing, I can't. But there is a song that your story or what you just said reminded me of. Do you remember the song, I Wouldn't Take Nothing for My Journey Now?
Happy Goodman, right?
I think so. And so why don't you sing that as we say goodbye to all the people? That would be wonderful. All of the
Wow.
people here in the studio are watching and listening. So this is your
You
debut.
You picked a song I don't know.
Just make
That's
it
the
up as you go
only
along.
line
I mean, come on.
from the song. Oh, I wouldn't take nothing for my journey now. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard Vestal Goodman sing it, but I guess it wasn't one I ever sang myself. So,
Well, maybe the next time that we get together on a show, you can sing the entire song because it is one of those rapid fire type songs. I mean, you just have more words than what you can say, and
well,
it's funny.
the problem might be, if you got people there and I got people here, they might be jumping up and dancing and shouting before I get through.
That's fine. That's fine. Hey, you have fun.
You too have enjoyed it today, and to everyone listening, stay tuned for much more to come. See you next time.